Chapter 782. Comparatively speaking, Wuxia had become famous in the Spirit Stream battlefield after dominating the Spirit Stream ranking for nearly a year. However, Wuxia had been unknown since he started cultivating. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, he had broken through to the Cloud River realm early on. When he arrived at the Cloud River battlefield, he was alone. When Lu Yi found him and brought him to Great Meng Mountains returning Heaven Valley to cultivate, he had almost never left returning Heaven Valley. Therefore, almost all the cultivators present had never seen him before. However, he was still someone who had left his name on the Cloud River competition's top 100 list. Even if no one had seen him before, they still had some impression of his name. They vaguely remembered that during the Cloud River competition's ranking, he was ranked around 30th. With a Cloud River Realm 7th Order cultivation and a ranking around 30th, it was clear that he had a deep foundation. Therefore, even if Wuxia's cultivation was slightly weaker, no one would underestimate him. If such a person was really allowed to cultivate to the Cloud River Realm 9th Order, it was unknown how much his strength would improve. Only Wuxia's eyes flashed. Unlike the others, he had seen Wuxia before. When he went to returning Heaven Valley with Song Jue to encircle Lu Yi and secretly attacked Lu Yi, this big-body cultivator was standing not far from Lu Yi. How could Wuxia forget someone with such a distinctive physique like Wuxia? But now, it seemed that Lu Yi and this person were pretending not to know each other. It was obvious that they were plotting something. He did not expose this matter immediately, but he was secretly vigilant in his heart. More and more people arrived. There were already 9 people gathered at the peak. In addition to the top 6 of the Cloud River competition, Wuxia was 16th, Wuxia was 29th, and Wuxia was in the top 300. Such a lineup and configuration confirmed everyone's previous suspicions. This time, what they were about to face was bound to be tricky and dangerous. Their lives might be in danger. However, at this point, no one had any room to retreat. Everyone had come here based on their intuition. That intuition could be said to be the guidance of Heaven's will. If they really retreated at this time, the consequences were not something they could bear. Therefore, even if they knew that the future was full of troubles, they could only brace themselves. What's more, these were all talents of the Cloud River realm. How could they not know that risks were opportunities? Therefore, while they were worried, they were more excited and expectant. What did the heavens will want them to solve? Things? He had actually created such a powerful PF, which had never happened before. At the very least, there was no record of such a thing in the records of the various top sections. In the center of the arena, Lu Yi was still sitting cross-legged. His finger lightly tapped the hilt of the mountain saber as he pondered. Wuxia was chosen because of her identity as a medical practitioner. It probably had nothing to do with her cultivation. But what about the giant armor? Among the Cloud River tier cultivators, there were still a few who were stronger than him. Why was it that no one else had been chosen but giant armor? Lu Yi could not help but recall what had happened in Fox Immortal Valley. Back then, he had dealt with Fox Immortal and received the baptism bestowed by Heaven's Secrets. Perhaps he had also accumulated the blessings of Heaven's Secrets back then? Was this what allowed giant armor to stand out among the numerous Cloud River tier elites? It was just a guess. Whether it was true or not, Lu Yi didn't know. But very quickly, he remembered something else and raised his head to look at Wuxia. At this moment, Wuxia was thinking about the trick that Lu Yi and giant armor were using to hide their relationship when he suddenly felt a sharp gaze on him. He raised his head and saw that Lu Yi was staring directly at him. Wuxia could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He immediately realized that this was a warning from Lu Yi. Unwilling to give up, he asked, "What advice do you have for me, fellow Lu?" "Take care of yourself," Lu Yi said calmly. Wuxia's face twitched. How could he not hear the threat in these words? His heart was filled with resentment. He hadn't even thought about whether or not he should secretly expose the relationship between these two people. If he really did that, wouldn't Lu Yi cut him with a knife? Hong long long. Suddenly, a dull sound surged out from the depths of the earth. It was as if there was lightning swimming in the depths of the earth. Immediately afterward, the mountain peak shook. The sudden change caused everyone's expression to become serious. They all urged their bodies to rise into the air. But what they saw caused everyone's expression to change. Because it was not only the mountain peak that was shaking. All the nearby mountains were shaking. What is going on? Yang Yuan asked in shock. But who could give him an answer? This change was far too sudden. Nobody knew what was going on. After 3 breaths of time, all the mountains within hundreds of miles began to shake. A vast amount of spiritual energy descended from the sky. Then, a pillar of light shot out from one of the mountains and shot into the sky. More and more pillars of light followed. At once, countless pillars of light shot into the sky and pierced through the clouds. It was a magnificent sight. Even if one was thousands of miles away, they could still see it clearly. The explosion of the pillars of light was sudden and the area it covered was unimaginable. After a few moments of explosion, the pillars of light suddenly expanded. Endless and pure spiritual energy from heaven and earth followed the expansion of the pillars of light and permeated between heaven and earth. Everyone who was still in shock immediately felt their entire body warm up as if they were in a sea of spiritual energy. The density and purity of the spiritual energy in heaven and earth was no less than the spiritual energy that came with the use of spiritual gourds. In other words, if one were to cultivate in such an environment, it would be equivalent to using spiritual gourds to cultivate. The speed and efficiency of cultivating were definitely something that all cultivators dreamed of. Therefore, even if they did not know what was going on, everyone instinctively began to breathe in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, Lu Ye's gaze was attracted by the light ribbons floating in the sea of spiritual energy. These light ribbons were born after the pillars of light expanded. At this moment, everyone was not only bathing in the sea of spiritual energy, but also seemed to be bathing in a sea of light. And this sea of light covered an area of thousands of miles. What attracted Lu Ye's attention was not the light ribbons themselves. It was the way they flowed. The light ribbons entangled with each other as if they had a mind of their own, quickly spreading out towards the entire sea of light. The entanglement was actually a combination of yin and yang. Lu Yi hurriedly activated the insight spirit inscriptions to enhance his eyes and looked around. As a Dharma cultivator, Lu Qing clearly saw some clues. He eagerly breathed in the spiritual energy while observing with rapt attention. In just a short span of 10 breaths, one side was entangled by the light ribbons. The huge embedded spirit inscriptions appeared in everyone's vision, floating above everyone's heads and enveloping the mountain peak where everyone was previously. With the huge spirit inscriptions as the center, more yin and yang appeared and quickly spread out in all directions, as if there was an invisible hand secretly controlling all of this. Lu Ye! Lu Qing shouted, "What spirit inscriptions are these?" Lu Ye's cultivation in the array Dao was extremely high. This was no secret, and the array Dao was related to the Dao of spirit inscriptions. Therefore, after Lu Qing could not recognize the huge spirit inscriptions, he immediately asked Lu Yi. Lu Yi had already flown to a higher altitude and looked around with his full vision. A moment later, he revealed a look of amazement. "Lu Yi!" Yang Yuan also shouted from below. "Now that everyone is a bee tied to a rope, don't hide anything. Something must be going on for such a huge change to occur." Others could not see any clues, but Lu Yi obviously noticed something. Lu Ye's leisurely voice came from above. With mountains and rivers as the foundation and pure spirit energy as the source, it's unpredictable. It's really a big deal. In his observation, the many spirit peaks and mountain ranges within a radius of 1,000 miles had formed the pattern of a large array under the yin and yang inscriptions derived from the light ribbons. And it was a large array that he was very familiar with. He didn't want to say anything, but considering that Hua Si, Giant Armor, and Mu Qingyun were all on his side, Lu Yi still explained, "What's above our heads are void spirit inscriptions." Lu Qing's face changed when he heard this. He had naturally heard of void spirit inscriptions, but in this world, who could construct such a huge void spirit inscriptions? Even those divine sea realm cultivators might not have the ability to do so, right? Lan Zi's expression was solemn. "You just said that the mountains and rivers were the foundation. With pure spirit energy as the source, could it be that this void spirit inscriptions are the core of a large array? Lu Yi glanced at her leisurely. That's right. The group of people suddenly felt their hair stand on end. With such a huge void spirit inscriptions as the core, then how huge was this large array? Lu Qing's face turned green. As far as he knew, there was only one type of large array that used void spirit inscriptions as the core. That was the famous teleportation array. But why was it a teleportation array? Within the 9 states, including the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield, teleportation was done with the Tianji pillar. Under normal circumstances, there was no need for teleportation arrays at all, so even those formation cultivators would not put much effort into teleportation arrays at the beginning of their cultivation. Of course, this was also related to the difficulty of setting up this array. If one's formation skills were not enough, they could not even construct void spirit inscriptions, so how could they set up an array? So far, among the Cloud River realm, only Luya could set up a teleportation array. If he said this was a teleportation array, then it must be a teleportation array. And everything in front of them was grand and magnificent, definitely not something that could be achieved by human strength. This was the means of Tianji. They had always guessed that Tianji had gathered them here to solve a very troublesome and dangerous matter. It had not even started, and Tianji had already created a teleportation array of such a scale. It was hard to imagine what was waiting for them. Lu Yi was also very curious. Where was the other end of the teleportation array? Was it some mystery realm? But the scale of this teleportation array was really too big. In a daze, the void spirit inscriptions floating above everyone's heads slowly descended, and what followed was a violent surge of pure spirit chi between heaven and earth. The void started to distort and change, and everyone involuntarily felt a sense of weightlessness. A hint of a bad feeling arose in Lu Ye's heart. He raised his head and looked at everyone, secretly reminding them, "Everyone, have a pleasant journey." Chapter 783. What? Feng Ruli was dumbfounded, but in the next moment, the void spiritual convergence had completely fallen, trapping everyone in it. Faint screams and screams could be heard, and a boundless sense of weightlessness filled the entire body. If the experience of Lu Ye's own teleportation array was like stepping into a bottomless abyss, constantly falling down endlessly, it would be the same. The Yuan first floor of the teleportation array. Not only did it feel like stepping into a bottomless abyss, but there was also an invisible force. Moreover, there was an invisible force that was moving twice and moving twice. It made people who were not experienced in the world and had no social connections to give birth to an illusion that they were being stretched out from time to time. In the entire process, it was completely meaningless to be first or second in the Cloud River. His spiritual power was almost imprisoned in his body, unable to be activated, and he could only be at the mercy of that invisible force. Everything in his field of vision was grotesque and variegated. Time and space blurred at this moment. It was at the same time that this huge teleportation array covering a radius of 1,000 miles was activated that a message inexplicably exploded in Lu Ye's heart. A dazzling light burst out, and from a distance, it looked like the sun had set in this mountain range. Such a strange movement naturally attracted the attention of countless cultivators. But in just 10 breaths of time, the light like the eruption of the sun disappeared, and along with it, the rich and pure heaven-earth spiritual chi that enveloped a radius of 1,000 miles disappeared. When cultivators rushed here to investigate the situation, there was no trace left, and it became a strange story for a while. The dim sunlight shone on the earth, and the whole world was like a mirror covered with dust, covered with turbid colors. On a withered old tree, a few bony crows stared down with red eyes. Suddenly, as if sensing something, the crows flew through the sky, and their cawing sounds quickly faded away. The void suddenly distorted, and violent ripples spread out. As the ripples spread, a figure vaguely appeared from within. In just a few breaths of time, the figure appeared from nothing, from illusory to real, and finally completely froze. The ripples suddenly converged, and the figure in the air no longer fell down. He fell down uncontrollably. After a series of flailing movements, he landed heavily on the ground, motionless. Wuxia was a little dizzy. Ever since he embarked on the path of cultivation, he had never encountered something so bizarre. First, they followed their senses to the nameless spirit mountain. In the end, 9 people arrived there. Before they could figure out what was going on, a huge teleportation array suddenly appeared. Then, the array was activated. He didn't know how long he had been teleported, but when the teleportation ended, he appeared here. His spirit energy was scattered, and he was almost unable to activate it. He fell from midair, but he didn't feel the pain he had imagined. He felt as if he had smashed into something soft. Instead of rejoicing, his heart was filled with urgency. He didn't know where this place was, nor did he know if there was any danger here. What he needed to do now was to quickly harmonize his spiritual power so that even if he encountered any danger, he would have some ability to protect himself. Closing his eyes and concentrating, he silently operated his mysterious art. A moment later, the scattered spiritual energy in his body slowly condensed, and his chaotic perception gradually recovered. Immediately, Wuxia smelled a strong stench. It was probably the stench of a corpse that had not been cleaned for many days. Someone close to him had died, and it had been a while since they died. Wuxia immediately came to this conclusion. He didn't panic. As a cultivator at the Cloud River tier, he had killed many people with his own hands. How could he be afraid of the dead? Caw-caw. Shrill bird cries sounded, accompanied by the flapping of wings. The black crows that had flown away earlier flew back and landed on the withered tree trunk, looking down at Wuxia from above. Their scarlet eyes were filled with desire as they stared closely at him. Wuxia opened his eyes and saw those skinny black crows. He instantly laughed in anger. Could it be that these feathered beasts thought that he was about to die and were waiting here to eat their fill? He was rapidly recovering. Although the process of teleportation had caused his spirit energy to scatter and his 5 senses to become chaotic, it had not injured him. Moreover, even if he couldn't activate his spirit energy, these black crows wouldn't be able to covet him. However, some doubts arose in his heart. There should be corpses next to him. These beasts were already so thin, so why didn't they go looking for food? Faintly, he felt that something wasn't quite right. After a while, Wuxia finally recovered. He hurriedly climbed up from the ground and flicked his finger. A few bursts of energy flew into the air and knocked the black crows down from the tree. Only after venting his anger did he have time to examine his surroundings. When he saw what he saw, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was because a turbid sun hung high in the sky, as if it was covered in a thick layer of dust. The light it emitted was not the kind that could dazzle the eyes. Instead, it was more like a candle flame in the wind. This was the sun? Wuxia was stunned. Even the lightless sun of Jianghu would be brighter than this, right? And judging from the position of the sun in front of him, it should be the time when the sun was shining fiercely. There was no way it would be like this. This sun gave him the feeling of an old man on the verge of death, about to reach the end of his life. A frightening thought suddenly arose in his mind. On the nameless mountain peak, when the giant transportation array suddenly formed, everyone couldn't help but panic. At the same time, they were guessing where the transportation array would send them. Wuxia naturally had his own guesses. He felt that the transportation array would send them to a secret territory. Yi was a common way to enter the secret realm. However, this time, the teleportation array was a little bigger and grander. Since he started cultivating, Wuxia had entered and exited many secret territories. However, no matter how different those secret territories were from the 9 continents, there was one thing that didn't change. The sun, the moon, and the stars didn't change. Because those secret territories were all under the environment of the 9 continents. The place in front of him seemed to be different from the secret territories he had been to before. Wuxia quickly raised his hand and touched his battlefield imprint. His expression suddenly changed. The battlefield imprint didn't respond. This was something that had never happened before. The battlefield imprint could be considered a gift from the heavens. In the 9 continents, no matter if it was a cultivator from a sect or a loose cultivator, Their entire cultivation was closely related to the battlefield imprint. Cultivators could use the battlefield imprint to check on all kinds of information about themselves. They could use it to communicate with their friends and family. They could even use it to determine whether a person was dead or alive. As long as one was in the 9 continents, the battlefield imprint would never lose its effect. But now, the battlefield imprint actually didn't respond. The sun in the sky was so strange. Then, he thought about the gigantic transportation array that covered thousands of miles. The frightening thought in his mind gradually became clear. Although he felt that it was impossible, after eliminating all possible options, the last remaining one, no matter how impossible it was the truth. This place. Ingwuji's mind shook, and his thoughts were chaotic. Is this not the 9 continents? If this was not the 9 continents, then where was this place? He forced himself to calm down and secretly comforted himself. Maybe his guess was wrong. To prevent himself from thinking too much, and at the same time to confirm his surroundings, he quickly looked around. Soon he determined his location. It was an unmarked graveyard. Broken corpses could be seen everywhere. Many of the corpses were beyond recognition. The corpses were dressed differently. Rich merchants, they seemed to have street nicknames. There were also some who seemed to be cultivators. The tip of his nose was filled with the thick stench of corpses. When he fell from midair, he didn't feel much pain. It wasn't because his physique was strong, and it wasn't because his 5 senses were messed up. It was because he just happened to fall on a corpse. Looking up, there were at least 8,000 corpses piled up on this unmarked graveyard. Even someone like Ingwuji felt his scalp go numb at the sight. What exactly happened here? Why did so many people die? Also, where were the others? There were a total of 9 people gathered by Tianji. Since he was here, where were the others? However, thinking about it from another perspective, such a gigantic transportation array must have teleported a long distance. It was normal for there to be some deviation in the transportation array. What he could be sure of was that even if there was a deviation, it wouldn't be too far away. He should be able to find traces of the others nearby. He had to hurry and meet up with them. At this moment, he couldn't care less about Haoyan Alliance and Wanmo Ridge. If things were really as he guessed, then the situation would be terrible. Only by breaking through the barriers of the factions and sincerely cooperating would there be a way out. Thinking this, Ingwuji activated his spiritual power and was about to fly up. However, at this moment he suddenly felt a cold touch on his ankle. Then he was tightly gripped. Ingwuji subconsciously looked down and saw a handful of rotten flesh tightly gripping his foot. There was also a dead person's head next to his foot. It was staring at him with wide eyes. When their eyes met, Ingwuban's hair stood on end. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Roar! The dead person's head suddenly opened its mouth. As it roared, a thick corpse gas spewed out. Ingwuji didn't notice and was covered in it. He instinctively attacked. His curved blade slashed down, and the dead person's head exploded. His body floated back, still in shock. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the peaceful, unmarked common graves. The corpses that had been lying here for a long time seemed to have come back to life. They all stared straight at him. Every corpse that stood up was filled with a thick corpse gas. There were even incomplete corpses that crawled toward him with only their hands. Even though Ingwuji had seen many storms and had a calm heart, he couldn't help but cry out in shock. He had never seen or even heard of the dead coming back to life. He hurriedly flew up, wanting to leave this strange place. Chapter 784. The sun hung high in the sky, emitting a fragrant light. The entire world was bathed in a twilight atmosphere. In the wilderness, on a bare mountain peak, Lu Yi stood with his hand on his saber, frowning. There was no one else around, and the battlefield imprint did not respond. This made it impossible for him to contact Hua Si and Giant Armor. Naturally, he could sense what Ingwuji could sense. And he made the same deduction as Ingwuji. This was not the 9 states. In the past, regardless of whether it was the realm of beasts or the soaring dragon realm's secret realms, they were all located in the 9 prefectures. Therefore, when cultivators entered the secret realms, they could experience a projection of the secret realms for a certain period of time. Moreover, under the operation of heaven's secrets, they could obtain a natural identity that was suitable to integrate into the secret realms. For example, Lu Yi had obtained the young master of the Thousand Beasts sect and the sixth young master of the Tyrant Saber School. However, this time, he did not obtain any identity. He did not even know anything about this world. The only thing he knew more than Wuxia and the others was the name of this world. What was more important than the O? Because at the moment when the teleportation began, a piece of information exploded in his mind. Save the broken, unparalleled continent. This should be the guidance of heaven's secrets. Lu Yi did not know if everyone had received this guidance, or if only he had received it. It was a simple instruction, but it contained a lot of information. The world called the unparalleled continent was in a broken state. How could such a large domain be broken? How could this be saved? Thinking back to the realm of beasts that he had experienced so far, it seemed to be related to saving the world. It was the same in the realm of beasts, the dragon-soaring realm, and the unparalleled continent. In comparison, the unparalleled continent did feel like it was on the verge of death. Lu Yi recalled the 4 sealed pillars of heaven's secrets he had obtained, and had some guesses in his heart. It did not make sense that the people of the Heavenly Secrets Business Alliance would wait there and give him 4 pillars of heaven's secrets. The key to saving this world should lie in these 4 pillars of heaven's secrets. Moreover, if this was not the 9 states, then it would be troublesome to return to the 9 states. The pillars of heaven's secrets were the only hope for those who were teleported here. However, where to place the pillar of heavenly secrets was a problem. It was not something that could be casually placed there. His thoughts gradually became clearer. What he needed to do now was to quickly familiarize himself with this world and gather some basic information about this place. Then, he needed to think of a way to place the 4 pillars of heavenly secrets in a suitable location. Since he wanted to gather information, he had to find the cultivators of this world. At the same time, he had to look for Wuxia and giant armor. Lu Yi was not too worried about the giant armor's safety. Tianji had chosen Cloud River tier cultivators like them, and had teleported them here. Thus, the problem of this realm could only be solved by cultivators at the Cloud River tier. In other words, this world was very likely to be the same as the Soaring Dragon realm. There were no existences above Yunhe. With giant armor's ability, there was no need to worry too much. Due to the absorption of the Blood Realm, the Soaring Dragon Realm's foundation was constantly being drained away. Therefore, the cultivators' cultivation levels were getting worse and worse with each generation. This Wuxia continent was broken, and it would inevitably cause the foundation of heaven and earth to continuously flow away. Perhaps a long time ago, there were stronger people in this world, but it might not be so now. However, Wuxia was a medical cultivator after all. Even if her methods of using poison were unpredictable, the sooner she found it, the sooner she could be at ease. One having made his decision, Lu Yi rose into the air and randomly flew in a direction. He had not flown far when he sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. There seemed to be faint fluctuations of spiritual power coming from that direction. Someone was fighting. Lu Yi immediately changed his direction and flew in that direction. After flying for less than 30 miles, he looked into the distance and saw a person fleeing pathetically in midair. Behind him, a large group of densely packed figures chased closely. The crowd that was chasing after him gathered together, appearing disorderly. Moreover, the surface of each of their bodies was filled with an ominous aura. Those auras gathered together, and as far as the eye could see, it was like a mass of yellow clouds overturning the sky. Lu Yi could tell at a glance that the guy fleeing in front was Wuxia. He could not help but frown. What was this guy doing? Why was he being chased by so many people the moment he arrived here? If it were any other time, Lu Yi would naturally not care about this guy's life or death. However, the situation of the Wuxia continent was unclear now. Whether it was Wuxia or the others, they were all gathered together under the guidance of Tianji. Tianji had the intention of wanting them to work together. As a result, Lu Yi could not ignore them. No matter what, in this foreign land, Ing Wuji could be considered one of his own. While Lu Yi was thinking about this, Ing Wuji had already discovered his tracks. He was overjoyed and shouted from afar, "Lu, save me!" His panicked mood instantly calmed down. He had thought that he was going to die this time, but who would have thought that he would run into Lu Yi here? If there was anyone in this world who could save his life in this situation, it would be Lu Yi. The heavens have not forsaken me, Ing Wuji thought to himself, but he soon became nervous again. He didn't know if Lu Yi would help him or not. They belonged to different factions, and there was a rift between them before. It wouldn't be strange if Lu Yi chose to stand by and watch. Counting on him to save his life, he could only hope that Lu Yi's kindness would flare up. Just as Ing Wuji was feeling nervous, Lu Yi had already moved closer to him. As the distance closed, Lu Yi frowned. He had thought that Ing Wuji was being hunted down by the cultivators of this world, but now it seemed that the ones chasing him were not cultivators, but corpses with rotting flesh hanging from their bodies. The yellow clouds that he had seen before were formed by the corpse qi emitted by these corpses. What were these things? When Ing Wuji first saw these corpses come back to life, he was scared half to death. Although Lu Yi was not scared to this extent, his heart suddenly tightened. He had never seen such a bizarre thing. "What are these?" Lu Yi asked as he looked at Ing Wuji, who was quickly approaching him. Ing Wuji was about to vomit blood. With a depressed expression, he said, "I don't know. I didn't provoke them." He had been transported to an unmarked graveyard. He had just recovered when these corpses came back to life and attacked him. He had fled here in a sorry state. Lu Yi calmed himself down and charged towards Ing Wuji. He faintly felt that these strange existences in front of him might be the source of this world's crisis. Since he had encountered them, he naturally had to try to collect some information. At the very least, he had to find out whether these strange existences were dead or alive, and how strong they were. "Hey!" The two of them brushed past each other. Ing Wuji was too late to stop him. When he looked back, he saw that Lu Yi had already killed his way into the horde of corpses. The crimson spirit energy around him made it seem as if his entire body was on fire. The light he emitted was even brighter than the sun in the sky. The corpse qi is poisonous, and they seem to have a combination technique. Ing Wuji could not stop him and could only hurriedly warn him. If they were in the kingdom of the 9 states, he would be more than happy to see Lu Yi die as soon as possible. However, in this strange place, he only had one familiar person in front of him. He did not want Lu Yi to die here. Comparatively speaking, he was more willing to face Lu Yi. This group of incomparably strange existences. At the very least, Lu Yi knew their roots. The corpse qi was indeed poisonous. As soon as Lu Yi killed his way into the horde of corpses, he sensed it because his talent tree had reacted. He hurriedly circulated his spirit energy to protect himself, blocking the corrosion of the corpse poison. The Pan Mountain saber in his hand glowed with flames. With one saber and one saber, he cut a bloody path through the horde of corpses. The tip of his nose was filled with the nauseating stench of corpses. As the corpses were cut open, pus and rotten flesh splattered everywhere. If one's mental fortitude was slightly weaker, not to mention fighting with these strange existences, they would probably be terrified just by seeing them. Lu Yi quickly understood what Ing Wuji meant by the combined strength technique. The auras emanating from these corpses were not strong, and from their clothes, it was obvious that they were not cultivators, but mortals. However, they could still exert great power. This was very strange. Their bodies were covered in rotten flesh. It seemed that just by walking around, the rotten flesh would fall off. However, in reality, their physical defenses were very strong. The problem lay in the corpse qi that enveloped them. This corpse qi was condensed to benefit the user. The corpses among them could borrow the strength of the other corpses. Therefore, even mortals who had been Ben 10 or 15 cultivators in their lives would not be able to make a casual attack. The shroud of corpse qi allowed these corpses to work together to kill the enemy. The corpse qi was also poisonous, and could attach to the corpses to form a strong defense. No wonder Ing Wuji was being chased by such a group of existences. Although he was a ghost cultivator and was not good at fighting head-on, That was only in comparison. Yun He Li's ninth order cultivation wasn't ranked 16th in the true 6 rivers. If they were to fight head-on, in a head-on fight, he was only weaker than a few Cloud River ninth order cultivators. If the zombie horde was not strong, he would not have fled in panic. Lu Yi was killing his way through the zombie horde. Broken limbs and rotten flesh flew everywhere. Ing Wuji, who had already used a secret technique to hide his body and retracted his aura, was hiding in amazement. He sighed in his heart. Lu Yi was ridiculously strong. The zombie horde that he had no way to deal with could not be said to be vulnerable in front of him, but he could deal with it with ease. He killed in and out of the huge zombie horde like a tiger in a flock of sheep. It had to be said that when fighting against each other, Lu Ye was an absolute enemy. But as a companion, he could casually provide a great sense of security. It was as if as long as he was there, even if the sky fell, he could hold it up. Ing Wuji's heart was a little sour. Why was such a person born in Grand Heaven Alliance and not Myriad Demon Ridge? Why did they have to compete with Lu Ye in this generation? One with Lu Ye in this generation, no matter how talented the other prodigies were, they would only be reduced to background characters. The heavens were really unfair. Chapter 785. After observing for a while, Ing Wuji's expression turned solemn. Lu Ye's strength was incomparably strong, and every slash was effective. However, there were too many of these zombies. It was impossible for Lu Yi to kill them all by himself. If he continued to fight, even Lu Yi would die from exhaustion. However, Ing Wuji didn't see any intention of Lu Yi to escape. One man and one saber, he slaughtered his way in and out of the zombie horde. Secretly anxious, he could only swallow a spirit pill to heal himself first. On the battlefield, Lu Yi slaughtered his way in all directions, his powerful mind spreading out. After fighting for a long time, he noticed some irregularities. There was no doubt that these zombies had no vitality. In other words, they were inanimate objects, but they could move as if they were alive. Moreover, under the yellow cloud of corpse chi, they could erupt with even more power than when they were alive. This was clearly not right. Lu Yi could faintly feel that these zombies were like marionettes on strings. Someone was secretly controlling them. He slaughtered his way in and out of the zombie horde. His only goal was to find the hidden person. Once he found him, he should be able to deal with these zombies. He originally thought that the hidden person was hiding in a hidden corner or had some method of concealment similar to ghost cultivators, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. The person controlling these zombies was hiding in the middle of the zombie horde. It was true that the skilled were bold. Strangely, he couldn't sense any vitality, nor could he find any clues. So, if he wanted to find the hidden person, he could only use this stupid method. Until a certain moment, when he stabbed his saber in a certain direction, his expression changed slightly. The battle went on for a long time. Hundreds of corpses had been cut in half by his saber, but those corpses never dodged his attacks, because they were inanimate objects that could be controlled by others. They had no fear, no pain. But when his saber slashed down, a zombie charged out from the side and blocked another zombie. It seemed like a coincidence, but in Lu Ye's eyes, this was an obvious flaw. He immediately turned his head and stared at an inconspicuous corpse in the middle of the group of zombies. That corpse looked no different from the other zombies. It was extremely ordinary. Its body was thin, and large patches of flesh and blood were missing. A thick corpse aura enveloped it. Placed in such a group of zombies, no one would give him a second glance. But when Lu Yi noticed it, her turbid eyes immediately lit up and she quickly retreated. Trying to run? Lu Ye's gaze was as sharp as a knife, and his sharp aura was like a leech that bit the corpse to death. The spiritual energy around his body burst forth, and he moved with his knife. Even if there were rotting corpses in front of him, they couldn't stop him at all. One man and one saber brazenly slaughtered their way through the crowd of corpses. With just a few leaps, they caught up to the corpse. With its tracks exposed, the rotten corpse could no longer hide. It opened its mouth and let out a bestial roar at Lu Yi. A thick corpse fog visible to the naked eye spewed out from its mouth and covered Lu Ye's head. Ing Wuji, who was hiding in the dark, was shocked and quickly shouted, "Lu Yi, be careful." He had suffered a loss like this before, causing him to be poisoned. Otherwise, with his strength, even if he couldn't defeat such a group of zombies, he wouldn't have been forced into a corner. If he hadn't met Lu Yi in time, he would have become a member of this group of zombies. But his warning was too late. The thick corpse fog covered Lu Ye's head and face, wrapping him in it. Yingwu Ji's heart sank. He had never thought that he would have to worry about Lu Ye's safety one day. Things were really unpredictable. Lu Yi was going to die. This thought flashed through Yingwu Ji's mind and he immediately wanted to retreat. However, just as he thought about it, a familiar figure appeared from the thick corpse chi. The fierce and wild aura did not weaken at all. The ruthless blade pierced through the sky and chopped off the rotten corpse's arms, then its legs. The third blade stabbed into the rotten corpse's head. The noisy battlefield suddenly quieted down. The demon-like group of zombies seemed to have been hit by a spell at this moment. They all froze in place, only the corpse fog that was as thick as a yellow cloud continued to churn. Yingwu Ji looked up and saw Lu Ye's long saber piercing into the zombie's head. At first glance, it looked like the zombie had been nailed to the sky by Lu Yi. The wind howled, and Lu Ye's clothes fluttered. Such a scene made Yingwu Ji's heart tremble. He secretly sighed as expected of Lu Yi, always able to do what ordinary people couldn't. He was an enemy that even Cloud River Rank 16 couldn't deal with, but Lu Yi had so easily subdued him. The gap between them was really not small. He was even more glad that Lu Yi was not far from him and that he had coincidentally bumped into him. Otherwise, his life would have been lost here. The mountain saber had penetrated 3 inches into the zombie's flesh, but it did not penetrate the zombie's head, so it did not cause any fatal damage. However, with its 4 limbs broken and its whereabouts exposed, this zombie could no longer cause any waves. Its eyes were fiercely fighting as it looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. Its mouth opened and closed, emitting a voice that sounded like metal rubbing against metal. "How did you find me?" He had a total of 8,000 zombies under his command. Looking at the entire Wushuang continent, it was considered a strong force. After so many years, he had been invincible with his zombies. No one had been able to find him among the zombies. But today he had met one. And almost at the same time that he was discovered, he had been subdued. When he opened his mouth to speak, Lu Yi could not help but raise his eyebrows. Although he had confirmed before that the zombies were being controlled by someone, Lu Yi had thought that the person controlling the zombies should be a cultivator. It was just like the Beast Tamer School in the 9 continents. However, the cultivators of the Beast Tamer School controlled demonic beasts while the cultivators of the Peerless Continent controlled zombies. Or should he call them the Corpse Tamer School? Corpse Tamer? But no matter what, in Lu Ye's understanding, this person should at least be alive. But now, it seemed that the situation was not quite right. Although the guy in front of him with his limbs cut off could speak and showed intense emotions, Lu Yi did not feel any vitality from him. Moreover, from his appearance alone, this guy was a dead man who had been dead for who knew how long. If his mind was not strong enough to grasp the flaw in that instant, it would not be easy to find this guy in such a large scale of zombies. "How could you find me?" The Corpse Tamer roared again. Although his face was full of rotten flesh, his eyes were full of unwillingness. If Lu Yi had not nailed his head with a long saber, he would not have been so obedient. Lu Yi pushed the Panshan saber forward an inch and said concisely, "I ask, you answer." The Corpse Tamer seemed to be enraged. A cold voice burst out from his cracked mouth. "No matter what you want to know, I will not do as you wish. My corpse clan is a dead spirit. Death is nothing to us. Only you humans fear death." As his voice fell, the yellow cloud of corpse aura that enveloped the countless zombies wriggled as if it had a mind of its own. The zombies that seemed to have been immobilized moved again. They came from all directions, letting out eerie roars as they pounced at Lu Yi with bared fangs and brandished claws. As spiritual energy surged, the Panshan saber ignited with flames. Lu Ye's wrist shook. The head of the zombie in front of him exploded with a loud bang, and the mutilated corpse fell to the ground. The rotting corpses not far from him were also like puppets whose strings had been cut. They fell down like dumplings, smashing into the ground and breaking into pieces. The puddles of corpses were a terrifying sight. Without the control of the corpse tamer, most of the zombies were so weak that they couldn't even withstand a single blow. In just a few moments, the 8,000 zombies were all turned into rotten flesh and broken bones. The vast wilderness was filled with a terrible stench. A gust of wind whistled past, and the yellow clouds that had not dissipated before were blown away, scattering in all directions. "It's done." Ingwu stared blankly at the scene, feeling that it was somewhat unreal. Under the effects of various spirit pills, his injuries had recovered a little. The corpse poison that had invaded his body also seemed to show signs of dissolving. This made Ingwu secretly sigh in relief. Coming from Dark Azura Hall, the pills he carried were naturally not ordinary. He also carried antidote pills with him all year round. However, this was the first time Ingwu had encountered corpse poison. Although his antidote pills were effective, it would still take some time for him to fully recover. After thinking for a moment, he walked out of his hidden state and called out to Lu Yi. "Lu Yi, this is a dangerous place. It's not good to stay. Hurry up and leave." If possible, he didn't want to travel with Lu Yi. Only after experiencing it with his own eyes could he understand just how strong this guy was. But in this situation, if he didn't move with Lu Yi, he would be powerless to resist if he encountered the same situation again. On one side was a completely unfamiliar and dangerous otherworld. On the other side was Lu Yi, who he barely knew, so Ingwu would naturally choose the latter, especially since he had received a life-saving grace from Lu Yi. He believed that Lu Yi was aware of this and wouldn't do anything to him. In the air, Lu Yi recovered from his thoughts. He raised his hand and a lifelike fire dragon flew out, swaying its body as it descended. The fire dragon slammed into the ground, causing flames to soar into the sky. An even worse smell than before filled the air. Under the raging flames, the broken corpses were quickly turned into charcoal. After doing this, Lu Yi turned around and flew off in a certain direction. Seeing this, Ingwu hurriedly followed. The turbid sun set and no moon rose. Even in the starry sky above, there were only a few stars. This was a dying world, a world that was about to be destroyed. But today, 9 guests from the outer heavens had suddenly descended, bringing a faint trace of life to this world that was destined to be destroyed. 7017K. Chapter 786. Under the hazy sunlight, 2 figures could be seen flying close to the ground. It was Lu Yi and Ingwu. However, from the way the two of them acted, Ingwu had always maintained a certain level of vigilance towards Lu Yi. The human heart was complicated, and Ingwu could not guarantee that Lu Yi would not try to kill him. Even though he had never shown such intentions, he had to be on guard. A person like him would never put his fate in the hands of others, especially when he and Lu Yi belonged to different factions. A short cooperation was fine, but how could true trust be built so easily? Lu Yi sensed this but did not care at all. He flew on his magic tool while carving a crystal in his hand. After dealing with the zombie horde yesterday, he and Ingwu set off together. But so far, they had not found a single living person. This situation could only mean one thing. Either there were no living people left on this broken peerless continent, or the living people were hidden in extremely hidden places. Lu Yi was more inclined to the latter possibility. Such a large continent, even if it was broken for some unknown reason, it should not be without a single living person. So the most important thing now was to find the native cultivators of the peerless continent and find a way to gather more information. In addition, they had to find the cultivators who came to the 9 states with them and meet up with them. Heaven's Secret had chosen them and spent a lot of effort to send them here, implying that they wanted them to work together. So, any one of the 9 people was an indispensable force. The journey was undoubtedly boring, and Ingwu's mood was somewhat depressed. As a ghost cultivator, he was not used to traveling with others. He was mostly alone, especially when traveling with someone like Lu Yi, so he subconsciously felt some pressure. Along the way, he tried to talk to Lu Yi, but unfortunately he did not get any response. After a few attempts, he gave up. He never knew that Wuxia was such a taciturn person. Suddenly, Wuji's eyes lit up. He focused and said excitedly, "Wuxia, there seems to be a city up ahead." Wuxia looked up and saw the outline of a city appear in his field of vision. The city wasn't large, but it was the only place they had discovered that had any possibility of living people living in it. The further they went, the clearer the outline of the city became. But gradually, the excitement and anticipation on Wuji's face disappeared. This was because the city looked extremely dilapidated, as if no one had lived in it for a very long time. Moreover, there were faint traces of a great battle around the city walls, and there were many places where there were bloodstains that had long since faded. The possibility of anyone surviving in such a city was close to none. About 30 kilometers away from the city, Wuxia suddenly landed. Wuji was stunned for a moment, but he quickly followed him down and asked curiously, "Aren't we going to take a look?" It was rare to find such a city. Regardless of whether there were people or not, they should go and take a look. Maybe they could find some useful clues. It might be dangerous. Wuxia gave him a rare reply, then threw the crystal in his hand to him. Wuji raised his hand and grabbed it. He asked curiously, "What is this?" Along the way, he saw Wuxia carving these crystal stones. He had asked before, but unfortunately, he didn't get a response. He never thought that Wuxia would actually give him one at this time. Sound transmission stone. Wuxia casually explained, and another similar crystal stone appeared in his hand. "Take it and you can communicate with me at any time. However, there are some restrictions on the distance. It can only be used within 3,000 kilometers. Beyond that, it won't be effective." This thing didn't exist in the 9 states. The cultivators of the 9 states all had battlefield imprints. As long as they were in the same world, they could communicate with each other at any time. There was no need for a sound transmission stone. Wuxia was able to make this thing thanks to his trip to the Dragon Soaring Realm. In the Dragon Soaring Realm, the cultivators used sound transmission stones to communicate with each other. At that time, he was curious, so he asked Huang Liang for a piece to study. He found that this thing wasn't complicated to make. The main thing was that there was a sound transmission spirit pattern in it. On Wuxia's talent tree, there was a sound transmission spirit pattern. However, this spirit pattern didn't have much use, so he had never used it. The sound transmission spirit pattern and the sound transmission spirit pattern were 80% similar. Wuxia studied it a little and thoroughly studied the sound transmission spirit pattern. Considering that he might need something like the sound transmission stone in the future, he bought some materials suitable for making the sound transmission stone when he was shopping in the Tianji treasure vault. It was just right to use it now. In this broken Wushuang continent, the battlefield imprints didn't respond at all. In other words, they had completely lost contact with the Tianji of the 9 states. If they wanted to contact each other, the sound transmission stone was the only choice. It was just that he hadn't expected this situation earlier. If he had, he would have left a piece for Wuxia and giant armor before the teleportation array was activated. It would be easy to find them now. Wuji's eyes lit up. Good stuff. He played with the sound transmission stone. Although it was his first time coming into contact with it, he was a Cloud River Tier Earth cultivator after all. He was talented, so he only needed to try it a little and understood how to use it. He channeled his spiritual power into it and casually said a few words to the sound transmission stone. The sound transmission stone in Wuxia's hand immediately reacted. After he activated it with his spiritual power, Wuji's words were transmitted from the sound transmission stone. Interesting. Wuji grinned. But as he grinned, he couldn't smile anymore, because Wuxia was staring at him. Wuji's heart sank as he vaguely realized something. "What do you mean? You can't be thinking of... You're a ghost cultivator." Wuji was annoyed. He had just asked Wuxia if he wanted to investigate the city. Wuxia had said that it might be dangerous, and then tossed him a sound transmission stone. Now that he was staring at him like this, his meaning was obvious. He clearly wanted to investigate the situation. But as a ghost cultivator, he was responsible for this. Wuji's eyes twitched a few times as he secretly assessed the difference in strength between himself and Wuxia. In the end, he decided to agree to this. His fist wasn't as big as Lu Ye's, but there was nothing he could do about it. If something happens to me... Ing Wuji looked like he wanted to say a few last words. Lu Yi interrupted him. Don't worry. If the situation is bad, you only need to shout, "Jade blood dries the ancient," and I will immediately charge over to save you. Ing Wuji's eyes twitched even more. Are you serious? Lu Yi nodded solemnly. Trust me. Ing Wuji took a deep breath. Do I dare not trust you? Can I not trust you? With complicated emotions, Ing Wuji activated his concealment technique and silently approached the ruined city. After he left, Hupo, who had been crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder this entire time, shook his body. He flashed out like a ghost, burrowing through the ground. Lu Yi naturally couldn't rely on Ing Wuji to gather information. If he went with him, she should be able to investigate more carefully. As for himself, his concealment skills might not be inferior to Ing Wuji's, but he couldn't put all his eggs in one basket. No one knew if there was any danger in the city. If there really was some danger that he couldn't deal with, he could stay outside and think of a way to provide support. He continued to take out materials to refine a new sound transmission stone. Lu Yi couldn't help but think back to what the corpse controller had said the day before. He originally wanted to force out some useful information from the other party, but who knew that the other party's personality was so unyielding that he didn't even give him a chance. He had no choice but to kill him. Although he didn't force out too much information, the other party's last words inadvertently revealed something. Corpse race. The other party probably thought that he and Ing Wuji were cultivators of the peerless continent, so they didn't avoid such basic information. Ing Wuji should have heard those words as well, but Lu Yi didn't know what he was thinking. But Lu Yi thought of many things. The destruction of the soaring dragon realm was because of the blood realm's attachment, which led to the continuous loss of the world's origin, finally ushering in destruction. And the ones who invaded the soaring dragon realm were a strange race, the blood race. The peerless continent didn't have blood race, but there were corpse race. In comparison, the corpse race seemed to be more strange than the blood race. Although the blood race were taller and more slender than normal people, and were proficient in many strange blood path secret arts, they were at least alive. And the corpse race wasn't a living thing at all. In terms of danger, the corpse race seemed to be more difficult to deal with than the blood race. In the group of corpses that was destroyed yesterday, there was only one real corpse race. The other corpses were all controlled by the corpse race, just like the monster beasts controlled by the beast taming school cultivators. This was a strange race that could form an army by themselves. If Lu Ye's mind wasn't strong enough to accurately find the trace of the corpse race in such a group of corpses, there was no way to deal with such an enemy. Where did the corpse race come from? Could there be a realm like the corpse world? Lu Yi didn't know any of these. However, relatively speaking, the corpse race itself didn't seem to be very strong. As long as one could accurately find the corpse race, it wouldn't be difficult to kill them. And once the corpse race died, the corpses they controlled would lose their ability to move. From this point of view, from Lu Ye's point of view, the corpse race was easier to deal with than the blood race. Difficult? What about the 9 regions? Under the stable situation of the 9 regions, what hidden dangers were there? Lu Yi couldn't help but think of the insect race in the Immortal origin city. Since ancient times, the continuous confrontation between the two camps, did it have anything to do with this hidden crisis? In the 9 regions, did those divine ocean realm cultivators know about this information? Living longer and having a high cultivation base didn't mean that one would know more. The reason why Lu Yi could understand this was because he had seen and observed too many things during his last trip to the soaring dragon realm. That mysterious and omnipresent heaven's secret even directly appeared in front of him and communicated with him. There were hundreds of millions of cultivators in the 9 regions. Even those divine ocean realm cultivators might not receive such treatment. Chapter 787. With many thoughts running through his mind, Lu Ye's hands did not stop moving. Ing Wuji had already entered the city, and he was secretly following him, not making any movements for the time being. However, Lu Yi estimated that there were probably no useful clues in the city. If the native cultivators of this world really had to hide because of some crisis, they would definitely not hide in such a conspicuous place. They would most likely choose to hide in the depths of the mountains and forests where no one would tread, or some other place to hide. Time passed by, and at a certain moment, Lu Yi suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction. There were spirit chi fluctuations coming from that direction, as if someone was fighting. Yesterday, he had discovered Ying Wu Ji like this, so after noticing the movement, he couldn't help but frown. Could it be someone from the 9 provinces nearby? Quickly putting away the unrefined sound transmission stone in his hand, Yang Kai urged his body to rush over. As he got closer, Lu Yi slowly discovered that his guess was wrong. One of the parties fighting over there was not from the 9 provinces because the spirit chi fluctuations were not strong. When he arrived near the battlefield, Lu Yi jumped onto the trunk of a large tree and looked down. Only then was he able to clearly see the 2 sides fighting. One side was a man and 2 women. The man's cultivation was undoubtedly the highest, and the spirit chi fluctuations emanating from his body were around the 5th order Cloud River realm. The 2 women, a woman in her 30s and a 17 or 18-year-old girl, had barely reached the Cloud River realm. Among the 3, the man was seriously injured, with a huge wound on his chest and abdomen, and even his face was covered in an ominous aura. However, he was desperately protecting the 2 women, not letting them suffer any harm, so although the 2 women were in a sorry state, they were not seriously injured. Lu Yi looked at the opponent fighting with the 3 of them again and narrowed his eyes slightly. Because he could no longer be considered a human. His body was shriveled and thin, like a corpse that had been air-dried for countless years. His exposed skin was full of wrinkles, but it was this corpse that looked like it had been dead for God knows how many years, but the aura on its body was even stronger than that of the injured man. Moreover, his fighting style was extremely fierce, and the strength he could display seemed to be incomparably great. He did not have a spirit artifact in his hands, but his sharp fingertips were the most practical weapons. The wound on the man's chest and abdomen was caused by his fingernails. In addition, Lu Yi also discovered that Yang Kai's physical defense was amazing. Facing the joint attack of the 3 people opposite him, Yang Kai did not show any intention of dodging. He allowed the spirit weapons to hit him, but they could not hurt him at all. They only left shallow marks on his thin body. Is this also a corpse? Lu Ye's mind. The corpse clan's corpse chi contained corpse poison. He had noticed this when he fought with the corpse clan yesterday. However, for cultivators, this corpse poison wasn't a problem. Basically, as long as they used their spirit force to form a barrier around their body, they could block the corpse poison. Even if their spirit chi, they would be able to slowly dissipate it. The man in front of him was severely injured, but with his cultivation, it would not be difficult for him to recover. The important thing was that he had been poisoned, so he had to quickly detoxify himself so that he could have the strength to recover. Hearing Lu Ye's words, the middle-aged man smiled bitterly and shook his head weakly. It's useless. I've been poisoned by the corpse race's origin corpse poison, so don't waste the detoxification pill. Lu Yi frowned in confusion. Origin corpse poison? Is corpse poison divided into origin corpse poisons? However, from the meaning of this man's words, it seemed that there was no cure for origin corpse poison. Although the middle-aged man's life was in danger, Lu Ye's reaction was really strange. Origin corpse poison was a direct method the corpse race used to transform their clansmen, and there was no cure. Had this young man never heard of it? Not in a hurry to ask Lu Yi anything, the middle-aged man turned to the teary-eyed woman. Go and dispose of their bodies. The woman shook her head repeatedly. The middle-aged man said, I can still hold on for a while. I will wait for you to come back. The woman got up and looked at the man reluctantly. You must wait for me to come back. She urged her spiritual power and soared into the sky, but she went back the way she came to dispose of the bodies of her companions. After she left, the man slowly sat down with the young girl's help. He panted, and it was obvious that he was urging his spiritual power to suppress something. He looked at Lu Yi and said, Little brother, which secret realm did you come from? To have such ability at such a young age, in this broken Wushuang continent, only a few secret realms would be able to nurture someone like her. Scattered in various strongholds like them, struggling to survive, they would be able to nurture such a large number of young girls around them. When the corpse race member who was about to kill them heard this, he thought it was the young girl's cry of horror before she died, but he vaguely felt that something was wrong. Because the young girl's gaze was not looking at him, but past him and looked in the direction behind him. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of something breaking through the air, accompanied by a strong spiritual power fluctuation. There was someone else. The corpse race member did not have time to deal with the three people in front of him and turned around brazenly. What he saw was a fiery red figure pouncing down from the sky with a long saber in his hand, ready to attack. When the other party's fierce aura locked onto him, the corpse race member actually felt a prickling pain on his skin, something he hadn't felt in a long time. This was inconceivable to him. One had to know that the corpse race did not feel pain. He immediately understood that the prickling pain on his skin was not transmitted from his body, but from his mind. The person who came was very strong. Roar! The corpse clan roared angrily, and the shriveled flesh on his body suddenly tightened. His physique was strong to begin with, and under this action, he became even more impregnable. Even if a human cultivator was stronger than him, they might not be able to hurt him. And as long as they could not hurt him, he could kill the enemy. Clang! The long saber was unsheathed, and the fiery red saber light slashed out. Lu Yi had already brushed past the corpse race member and stood in front of the man and two women. The young girl and woman's eyes were filled with bewilderment, completely unable to understand what had just happened. The middle-aged man coughing up blood had a higher cultivation, but even he couldn't completely grasp the traces of the saber strike just now. But under that saber strike, the corpse race member who had nearly wiped out their entire team actually froze in place, not moving in the slightest. Vaguely, a strange sound could be heard coming from the corpse race member's throat. Lu Yi had already sheathed his saber. The saber scraped against the scabbard, and as if alarmed by this sound, the corpse race member's head suddenly rolled off. The wound was as smooth as a mirror, and dark green corpse race blood soared into the sky. The stench was unbearable. Lu Ye's spiritual power surged, and before the corpse race blood could even get close, it was incinerated. Ah! The young girl cried out in alarm again, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. She looked at the corpse race member who had already fallen to the ground, and then at the stern Lu Yi in front of her. She couldn't believe that such a powerful corpse race member had been cut down with a single strike. Moreover, the person who had attacked seemed to be only a year or two older than her. It was as unreal as a dream. Even the strongest person in the stronghold, Senior Drunken Mountain, wasn't this strong, right? You've been poisoned. Do you have an antidote? Lu Yi looked at the man among the three and asked. The corpse race member they had encountered yesterday wasn't very strong, but he could control thousands of rotting corpses, which was a bit like the beast taming school. But the one they encountered today was completely different from the one yesterday. He didn't have any rotting corpses under his command, and relied solely on his inconceivably strong physical body to crush his opponent unreasonably. This kind of corpse race member vaguely had the style of a body cultivator. But compared to the body cultivators of the 9 provinces, this corpse race member's physique seemed to be superior. In comparison, the corpse race members who could control rotting corpses relied on the power of a sea of people, but this corpse race member relied on his own ability. Let's go, I'll hold him back. The situation wasn't good. The injured man shouted and no longer cared about his own body, brazenly charging towards his opponent. Their team originally had 6 people, and there were 2 who were stronger than him in terms of strength. But after encountering this corpse race member, the entire team was like tofu, unable to withstand a single blow. After fighting for a short while, 3 people had already died, and even he was injured. Only the 2 women, perhaps because they were well protected, or because their cultivation was the lowest, they didn't catch the corpse race's attention and were safe and sound. But if this continued, they would definitely be wiped out. He would undoubtedly die, but if he could hold off this corpse race member before he died, perhaps his companions would have a chance to escape. In the apocalyptic world, people's hearts were complicated, and there was an endless amount of deception. It was also common to see internal strife, but there were also many people who were honest and sincere. Husband. Seeing the man take the initiative to attack the corpse race member, the woman couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The young girl grabbed her wrist and anxiously said, "Aunt Chen, let's go." The woman looked back, tears falling from the corners of her eyes. Even though she was unwilling, even though her anger burned like flames, in such a situation, what else could they do but run? "None of you can leave." Seeing this, the mummified figure coldly snorted. His voice was hoarse, not like a human's voice, but like a ghost's wail and wolf's howl from hell. A hand like an eagle's claw reached out and grabbed at the male cultivator. Dense corpse chi swept over, and the male cultivator almost couldn't breathe. The claw grabbed his chest and tore off a piece of flesh. After taking another punch, his body flew up like a kite and fell heavily in front of the two women. Seeing this, how could the young girl, who was pulling the woman away, still leave? She quickly helped the man up, but when she got up again, the corpse race member was already in front of them. At death's door, the woman instead felt relieved, and the hatred and anger in her eyes disappeared. Looking at the man who was coughing up blood, she had a hint of gentleness and warmth. In the end, she didn't abandon her husband. Although they couldn't be together forever, dying together was an acceptable outcome. At this moment, the young girl cried out in alarm. Click to download the best book chasing app. Many readers use this to read books. Chapter 788. I don't know what secret realm it is. Since he had just arrived, he knew almost nothing about the Wuxia continent except for a few pieces of information. This was different from when he entered the realm of beasts and the soaring dragon realm. These two realms could be considered to be under the overall environment of the 9 regions. When cultivators entered them, under the operation of Heaven's Secret, they could get some basic information about these two realms, and even get an identity suitable to integrate into them. But now, Lu Yi and the others had lost contact with Tianji of the 9 regions. How could they get any information from Tianji? However, listening to the meaning of the man's words, this secret realm didn't seem to be a secret realm in his understanding. It was more like a force with the characteristics of the Wuxia continent. Little brother, you didn't come from the secret realm? The man was surprised. Lu Yi shook his head. His identity was still a problem. He could try his best to hide it, but since he wanted to find someone to inquire about information, it was inevitable that he would reveal some flaws. So Lu Yi said the words he had thought of long ago. I don't know where I came from. I've lived there since I was young. This is my first time out. The man suddenly understood. So that's how it is. Seduso CC first. It wasn't strange. Although after the apocalypse, the major sects in the cultivation world abandoned their sectarian views and huddled together for warmth, people's hearts were complicated. After all, there were some strong cultivators who lived alone outside for various reasons. It was common to adopt a homeless orphan to accompany them and teach them carefully. So he didn't think too much about Lu Ye's explanation. Because in today's Wuxia continent, people like Lu Yi often appeared, but they were short-lived. Cough cough. The man's injury flared up and he coughed violently again. Blood flowed out of his mouth, but the blood was no longer red. It was obviously showing signs of turning into corpse blood. Even his whole body was covered in a layer of corpse chi visible to the naked eye. There are 2 kinds of corpse poisons. After knowing that Lu Yi was the kind of person who had not experienced the current Wuxia continent and had no understanding of the current situation of the human race, the man explained while gasping for breath, although ordinary corpse poisons affect cultivators, as long as they resist and resolve it in time, it's not a big deal. But the origin corpse poison is different. It's the power of the corpse clan's origin. There's no cure, and after death, it will inevitably turn into a corpse clan. Looking down at the wound on his chest, he smiled sadly and looked up at Lu Yi. So I can't be saved. This was also the reason why he was unwilling to take the antidote pill. In the post-apocalyptic world, elixirs were precious. Not to mention the antidote elixir, even the most basic elixir used for cultivation could not be wasted. This kind of thing was something that the cultivators of the 9 regions could never understand. Little brother, as a fellow human, I have a favor to ask of you. The man's chest heaved up and down violently. Send them back to the stronghold. You probably have nowhere else to go. Just go to the stronghold and you'll have a place to stay. All right. Lu Yi nodded, but still took out a detoxification pill from his storage pouch and handed it to the man. Take this pill first. He had the talent tree with him, so he basically wouldn't be poisoned. Naturally, he wouldn't be equipped with any antidotes. However, he had killed so many cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge and obtained all kinds of spoils of war. He had also accumulated a lot of antidotes. This elixir. The man stared blankly at the antidote pill in Lu Ye's hand. He felt that this pill's quality was beyond his imagination. It was higher than any elixir he had ever seen. In the post-apocalyptic world, the cultivation world had been greatly affected. Many inheritances had been cut off and the standard of alchemy was no longer what it was before. Although there was an alchemist in the stronghold, the elixirs refined by that alchemist were simply unsightly compared to this one. While he was in a daze, Lu Yi flicked the elixir into the man's mouth. When he instinctively swallowed it, the man wrung his hands and lamented, "Little brother, you AI." In the end, he was still a greenhorn. Even though he had already told him that there was no cure for the origin corpse poison, he still couldn't help but want to try. It was truly a waste to waste such a high-quality elixir on someone who was bound to die. However, his heart calmed down. People's hearts were complicated. You could know a person's face but not their heart. This young man in front of him was so generous, so he presumably didn't have a bad heart. He was relieved to entrust the 2 women to Lu Yi. After swallowing the elixir, some hope seemed to ignite in the man's eyes and he began to refine it. Lu Yi watched closely. He didn't know whether or not the antidote pill would work, but what if it did? Moreover, he had countless such elixirs in his storage space. The man regarded them as a standard, but if Lu Yi wanted, he could eat them like beans. After a short while, the man's aura suddenly became chaotic and he spat out another mouthful of blood. This time, the blood began to turn a dark green color. The antidote pill was useless. Lu Yi frowned. It seemed that the man's words were true. The origin corpse poison wasn't something a mere antidote pill could cure. If only Wuxia were here. With her methods, she would definitely be able to bring the dead back to life. Uncle Yu. The young girl hurriedly stepped forward and stroked the man's back with tears in her eyes. While Lu Yi was talking to the man, the young girl had been sobbing to the side. She was the hope of the stronghold's future and this was the first time she had left the stronghold with everyone, but she didn't expect such a terrible thing to happen. For the young girl who had never experienced anything like this before, the changes in the short span of 2 hours made her feel as if the sky was about to collapse. Husband. The woman who had left earlier turned back and hurried to the man's side. The man smiled. Fortunately, I made it in time. I didn't break my promise. The woman couldn't help but shake her head. Her tears were like broken pearls, falling down uncontrollably. You have to live well. It's not easy to survive in this world. You have to live well for me. The man stretched out his hand as if wanting to touch the woman's face for the last time, but his hand fell powerlessly to the ground. His vitality dissipated. His injuries were heavy and he was already at the end of his rope. The only reason he had held on until now was to see the woman one last time. The young girl covered her mouth and stood to the side, holding back her tears. She was heartbroken. The woman's expression was strangely calm. She grabbed her husband's hand and gently stroked it on her face, revealing a sad but beautiful smile. Husband, without you, what meaning is there for me to live? The young girl was startled and cried out in shock, Aunt Shen. She wanted to rush over as she spoke, but it was too late. After the woman finished speaking, she dispersed the protective spiritual power around her body and concentrated all her power on her other hand. She raised her hand and slammed it down on her chest. Under this palm, her chest caved in and her heart meridians were severed. The woman opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, her vitality faintly discernible. Lu Yi didn't expect this woman to be so infatuated and decisive. She had clearly made up her mind on the way back. By the time he reacted, it was already too late to stop her. Aunt Shen. The young girl threw herself on the woman and burst into tears. The woman wasn't dead yet. Her voice was like a mosquito as she finally reminded the young girl, "Remember, to take care of the corpse." Her head hung down and buried in the man's chest. The young girl cried with extreme sorrow. Lu Yi stood to the side and watched silently. For the first time, he truly felt the hardships of survival in this apocalyptic world. After a long time, the young girl gradually stopped crying and stood up. She looked at Lu Yi with red and swollen eyes. "Senior brother, is your spiritual power of the fire a tribute?" Just now, Lu Yi had rushed out and killed the corpse clan with a single slash. The attribute of his spiritual power was naturally seen by the young girl. At that time, Lu Ye's entire body was wrapped in fiery red spiritual power, looking like a burning fireball. Lu Yi nodded. "May I trouble you to burn the bodies of Uncle Yu and Aunt Shin? Is that so? Because of the corpse clan, there is a certain probability that they will turn into a corpse clan member, especially those who have been poisoned by the origin corpse poison. I don't want Uncle Yu and Aunt Shen to." She was afraid that Lu Yi would misunderstand, so she deliberately explained. This was also the reason why the woman left to deal with the bodies of her companions. There were many rules of survival in the apocalyptic world. If possible, timely disposal of the dead bodies was one of them. Only in this way could the increase in the number of corpse clan members be curbed and not let former companions become enemies. For such a small matter, Lu Yi naturally agreed. He raised his hand and shot out a fire dragon, enveloping the man and woman's bodies and quickly burning them to ashes. The young girl dug a hole not far away and buried the burned bodies in the hole. Only then was she done. Lu Yi stood quietly to the side, thinking about the various information he had just received. At this time, Wuxia had already returned from the ruined city. Just as Lu Yi expected, he did not find any valuable clues. Not to mention a person, he did not even see the shadow of a ghost. All that was left were pieces of broken walls and rubble. He hurried back, but did not see any trace of Lu Yi. Wuxia was first happy, then shocked. He was happy that he had finally gotten rid of Lu Yi. To be honest, as a ghost cultivator, he did not feel safe traveling with someone like Lu Yi. He always felt that Lu Yi would suddenly pull out a blade and stab him. He felt. But on second thought, this world was full of danger. When he had just arrived, he had almost encountered a life and death crisis. If Lu Yi had not helped in time, he would have been dead. Being alone might not be as safe as being with Lu Yi. But now, there was no trace of him. Did this guy dump him? Wuxia could not help but feel angry, but on second thought, he felt that something was wrong. If Lu Yi really wanted to get rid of him, all he needed to do was say a word. They didn't have much of a friendship to begin with, and Wuxia was a respectable person. He couldn't just shamelessly follow Lu Yi around. Moreover, Lu Yi had given him a sound transmission stone before this. Did something happen that caused him to leave temporarily? As this thought flashed through his mind, Wuxia took out the voice transmission stone, poured his spiritual power into it, and asked, "Lu Yi, where are you?" Chapter 789. He waited for a moment, but there was no response. Wuxia asked again. There was still no response. After so many times, Wuxia couldn't help but wonder if this sound transmission stone was even useful. Just as he was about to put it away, he looked around and put on a guilty expression. He pinched the sound transmission stone and said softly, "Dried jade bloodstream?" He waited for 10 breaths. Liar! Wuxia was so angry that his nose was crooked. He said that if he encountered any danger, he only needed to shout, "Dried jade bloodstream." If he didn't encounter any danger, he wouldn't be able to find that guy. If he really did encounter any danger, by the time he came to save him, his bones would be cold. Sure enough, others were unreliable. Just as he was about to put away the sound transmission stone, there was a sudden vibration. Wuxia hurriedly activated the sound transmission stone, and Lu Yi's voice came out. "Southeast." Wuxia looked up and checked the talisman. After a while, he confirmed that it was southeast and hurriedly rushed in that direction. Soon he saw Lu Ye's figure. To his surprise, there was a girl next to Lu Yi. A local cultivator? Ing Wuji's eyes lit up. Lu Yi wanted to find his master to gather information, and he also had the same thought. Unfortunately, neither of them had seen him this day. He didn't expect to meet one here. He couldn't help but take another look at the girl. The girl's expression was timid, and she couldn't help but shrink behind Lu Yi. Senior apprentice brother, he is, in comparison, although Lu Yi was cold, his actions just now showed that he wasn't a bad person. Ing Wuji was different. Perhaps he was used to it. The girl always felt that this guy was sneaky and didn't seem like a good person. This is my junior apprentice brother. Lu Yi explained casually. He comes from the same place as me. Ing Wuji couldn't help but roll his eyes. This was a small change in identity. Lu Yi didn't lose a piece of meat. The most important thing now was to find out useful information. Information. The girl was relieved. I haven't asked yet. How should I address you? Lu Yi asked. The girl said, my name is Yuan Xiang. How should I address you, senior apprentice brother? Lu Yi almost instinctively wanted to say Yi Lu's name, but on second thought, if he met other people from 9 regions and was called out, it might cause a misunderstanding. Lu Ye, my junior brother, Ing Wuji. Ing Wuji politely bowed. Greetings, junior sister Yuan Xiang. Yuan Xiang returned the greeting. Is there anything else to pack? Lu Yi looked at Yuan Xiang and asked. Yuan Xiang shook her head. She had already packed up everything that needed to be packed up. It was impossible for her to bring the skeletons back. Let's go then, Lu Yi said. Yuan Xiang led the way, and the 3 of them walked together. Gradually, Ing Wuji figured out what had happened and sighed inwardly. Lu Ye's luck was really good. He had taken the risk to go to that ruined city to investigate, but he hadn't found anything at all. While he was waiting outside the city, he had encountered a few local cultivators who had suffered great calamities, and he had even played the hero saving the damsel in distress. Judging from Yuan Xiang's attitude towards Lu Ye, even if she didn't trust him that much, at the very least, she didn't reject him and wasn't wary of him. And now he and Lu Ye were escorting Yuan Xiang to a so-called stronghold. With the absorption and devouring of the worlds, the source energy of heaven and earth flowed away, and the cultivation of cultivators became weaker with each generation. But soon, Lu Yi realized that the situation of the 2 worlds was different. But since more than 1,000 years ago, when the heavens changed, everything changed. More than 1,000 years ago, the peerless continent suddenly fell apart, and no one knows how many pieces it has broken into. Some people say that it was a change in heaven and earth itself, while others say that the aftermath of a battle between some elites in the galaxy shattered the peerless continent. I don't know how big the original peerless continent was, but what we are living in now is only a fragment of the peerless continent. When the heavens changed, countless powerful earth cultivators exploded and died for unknown reasons, or their cultivation levels fell. Since then, no cultivator above the Cloud River tier has appeared. Ing Wuji's expression changed, and Lu Yi also frowned. At this moment, he finally understood what the broken peerless continent meant. This was the literal meaning. This continent was a fragment of the real peerless continent. As for why this continent had fallen apart, too much time had passed, and there was no way to find out. So, what Yuan Xiang said was only the guesses of later generations. And the reason why Tianji chose them, elites on the Cloud River battle ranking list, to come here was indeed because this matter could only be handled by Cloud River tier cultivators. A world had its own limits. So, even if Tianji found some Spirit Ocean tier and True Lake tier cultivators and sent them here, they could only display the power of the Cloud River tier. It was better to directly send some Cloud River tier cultivators over. At least, in this cultivation level, Cloud River tier cultivators could display their full power and would not be suppressed. Moreover, Tianji had to pay a certain price to send them here. The price to send a few Cloud River tier cultivators should not be too high, but if it was to send True Lake tier and Spirit Ocean tier cultivators, then it was hard to say. The heavens fell and the earth cracked, and the casualties were innumerable. Even if cultivators were caught in it, they would be like candles in the wind, unable to protect themselves. Fortunately, not many years later, the effects of the changes in the heavens slowly disappeared, and Peerless Continent slowly stabilized. But soon after, another kind of crisis erupted, and until today, because of this crisis, the human race almost has no place in the outside world. Corpse race. Lu Yi naturally understood what the crisis Yuan Xiang was talking about was. Yuan Xiang nodded. Before the changes in the heavens, Peerless Continent never had this strange race called the corpse race, but a few years after the changes in the heavens, the first corpse race appeared. At that time, the cultivators of Peerless Continent only thought that something had gone wrong with his cultivation, or that he had contracted some strange disease, and did not cause too much of a stir. That time should have been the time of the major continents. Junior sister Yuan Xiang. Halfway there, Lu Yi spoke. If it's convenient, junior sister, can you tell us about the current situation of Peerless Continent? Ing Wuji immediately perked up his ears. What does senior brother Lu want to know? Yuan Xiang had not recovered from the grief of losing her family and forced herself to focus when she heard this. Anything is fine. Junior brother and I are inexperienced and know nothing about the outside world. We have never even seen the corpse race before. Ing Wuji couldn't help but nod from the side. Yes, us brothers have always lived in a secluded place and have never had any contact with the outside world. We were carefully taught by Master until a month ago, when Master passed away and let us go out. Lu Yi turned his head and looked at him leisurely. This guy really knows how to steal the show for himself. Ing Wuji looked back at him without fear. Yuan Xiang was silent for a moment and then said softly, I don't know much, so I'll just say it casually. If you have anything you want to ask, feel free to ask. It is said that Peerless Continent used to be an extremely prosperous continent, and there were many experts in the cultivation world and countless great cultivators. When she spoke, Lu Yi could not help but think of the dragon soaring realm. This situation seemed to be the same as the dragon soaring realm. The dragon soaring realm also used to have great cultivators in the divine sea realm, but because of the blood sect, every sect and family was busy cleaning up the mess. However, gradually, the number of corpse clan members increased, and all of the corpse clan members were transformed from humans. However, although they were still alive, their bodies no longer had the memories of their lives. It was as if their bodies had given birth to another unfamiliar intelligence. The corpse race is powerful and strange, and the human race has no way to deal with it. In our experience, many sects were exterminated in a day, and many cities were massacred in the world. In the following thousands of years, the unparalleled regiment was dominated by the corpse race. Our human race could only hide in one place. We could only drag out an ignoble existence in this stronghold. Although the human race still has some room for survival, if this continues. Yuan Xiang's eyes were dim. Thinking of Uncle Yu and Xin Yan who had died, her mood became sorrowful again. Lu Yi was silent for a moment, and then said, Is the corpse race also divided into types? There seem to be two types of corpse race members that we met before. One is your enemy, and the other is the one who can sing the corpses. You're talking about that kind of rotten corpse? Yes. There are indeed two types of corpse race. One is the rotten corpse that can control the corpses. Its strength is not too strong, but the corpses can work together. Moreover, the corpse race that controls the corpses is hiding among them, and it's very difficult to find them. The other type is what you saw before. It's the type of zombie. In terms of individual strength, it's stronger than the rotten corpse. However, as long as you're strong enough, you can still deal with it. So in the future, if you see rotten corpses and corpses, run as far as you can. Don't think about becoming enemies with them. Another rule of survival in the apocalyptic world was to never fight with rotten corpses and corpses easily. That was a thankless task. On the other hand, when cultivators saw zombies, they would try their best to kill them. Ing Wuji had a deep understanding of this and couldn't help but nod. However, when he thought of Lu Ye single-handedly taking the head of the enemy's general among tens of thousands of soldiers, he couldn't help but feel dejected. The difference in strength between them, was it really that big? So now, in the Peerless Continent, The human race basically lives in strongholds? Lu Yi asked again. Yuan Xiang nodded. Most of them. Strictly speaking, the place where you lived before was also a stronghold. Perhaps your master protected you too well and didn't let you come into contact with the outside world. It was not easy for the human race in the stronghold to survive. Their food and clothing were troublesome, especially when cultivators needed all kinds of resources for cultivation. They left the stronghold this time to find some resources outside. A small team like theirs basically had to go out once a month. Only then could they barely ensure their survival. As for cultivation resources, they could only rely on luck. If they were lucky, they could find some. If they were unlucky, they would not gain anything. Chapter 790. Going out to search for supplies was accompanied by great risks. Once they encountered the corpse race, a conflict was bound to break out. Take this time, for example. A team of 6 people went out, and in the end, only Yuan Xiang was left alive. After a while, Lu Yi barely understood the current situation of the peerless continent. The human race was in danger and struggling to survive. The corpse race was strong and difficult to provoke. Tell me about your stronghold, Lu Yi said. Stronghold? Yuan Xiang was lost in her memories. Our stronghold is not big, and there are not many people. There are only about 200 people. The strongest among them is Senior Zuishan, and the stronghold is also under his control. As Yuan Xiang spoke, Lu Yi and Ting Wuji also learned about the situation at the stronghold. In the apocalypse, many people gathered together to stay warm, so strongholds of all sizes were born. Some strongholds might have a few dozen or so. Some had hundreds, but at most, there would be no more than 1,000 people. That was why Yuan Xiang said that the place where Lu Yi and the others were staying was also a stronghold. Of course, the premise was that Lu Yi was telling the truth. Moreover, due to various sudden crises, the location of the stronghold was not fixed. If the stronghold's location exploded, if the stronghold was discovered by the corpse race, they needed to move as soon as possible. Otherwise, there would be a disaster. Ing Wuji was puzzled. It's not easy to survive. Why don't you all work together? Instead, you want to spread out? Lu Yi looked at him like he was an idiot. Ing Wuji was a little angry. What? Am I wrong? Yuan Xiang smiled bitterly and said, Actually, I've thought about this before. I asked Uncle Yu before, and Uncle Yu said that although joining forces could increase one's strength, correspondingly, the target was also big and very dangerous. If that was the case, it would definitely attract a lot of factory races encirclement. If they were to spread out like this, although they were alone, it would be easier to hide, and... She paused for a moment before continuing. Uncle Yu said that in this chaotic world, people's hearts are unpredictable. Even if they are all humans, they will fight for good things in the wild. So, no one can guarantee that others will be of the same mind as them. Maybe some strongholds have the same goal and will work together, but it is completely impossible to link all the strongholds of the peerless continent together. Ing Wuji frowned, not refuting. Although he had come to the Wushuang continent, he was not a native cultivator after all. He had never experienced the beating of life, so it was difficult for him to understand the complicated feelings of the cultivators in this world. This world was much more dangerous than any of the secret realms he had experienced before. But then again, this could be seen from the lineup that Tianji had prepared for them. The top 6 of the Cloudy River hegemony rankings were all present, and he, the 16th ranked ghost cultivator, was also present. There was also a gifted physique cultivator and a medical cultivator. A total of 9 people. If such a team could truly work together, sweeping through the entire Cloudy River battlefield would not be a problem. With such a lineup, the trouble to be solved would definitely not be small. Then, what about the arcane realm? Lu Yi asked. Previously, when he saved the man with the surname Yu, the latter seemed to have mistaken him for being from some mystic realm. Back then, Lu Yi hadn't asked about it in detail. Now that things had come to this, it was only natural for him to find out more about it. Mystic realm. Yuan Xiang suddenly revealed a yearning expression. That is the holy land that all humans yearn for. I heard that the people there live a completely different life from us. They are the same as they were 1,000 years ago. They can live peacefully, and the cultivation resources they have are endless. When she said this, Yuan Xiang's expression was like that of a poor child describing the luxurious life of a rich merchant. Luxurious. After her explanation, Lu Yi finally understood what the two words, arcane realm, meant in the Wushuang continent. The arcane realm here was not fundamentally different from the arcane realms he knew. Strictly speaking, they were all small spaces that were independent of the native world. There were many arcane realms in the 9 states. Whether it was the immortal essence city that Lu Yi had been to, the 10,000 beasts realm, or the soaring dragon realm, they were all arcane realms. These arcane realms were vast inside, and were dependent on the environment of the 9 states. Yet they could exist independently, and were not usually visible to the outside world. The Wushuang continent used to have extremely prominent sections. These sects naturally had their own arcane realms. These arcane realms were either used to herd spirit beasts, cultivate spirit plants and spirit herbs, or used for disciples to train themselves. However, after the changes in the heavens, even those large sects were destroyed. Although the sects were destroyed, the arcane realms were preserved. The disciples who were in good spirits hid in them. As time passed, there were constantly people who came to the arcane realm and gathered there to avoid the corpse clan. Pursuit. In the beginning, the human clan of the Wushuang continent occupied a lot of arcane realms. However, as time passed, the corpse clan of the corpse clan was destroyed. Many secret realms were discovered and destroyed by the corpse clan. Now, there were only 3 secret realms under the control of the human clan. They were the Meru Mountain Arcane Realm, the Ziwei Dao Palace Arcane Realm, and the Silver Snake Valley Arcane Realm. Compared to the chaos and hardships outside, the Arcane Realm could be said to be the last pure land of the Wushuang continent. It also preserved the essence of the human clan in this realm. The cultivators in the Arcane Realm would often go out to hunt the corpse clan. However, after so many years, they did not enter this world much. They were still firmly controlled by the corpse clan. For example, the small stronghold that Yuan Xiang was in could only hide in the east. Therefore, after seeing Lu Yi kill the corpse clan with one strike, the man surnamed Yu mistakenly thought that he was from one of the 3 arcane realms. In a certain house. Because to have such strength at such a young age, it was definitely not something that could be nurtured by a stronghold like theirs that could barely survive. Only those who came from the arcane realm had such a foundation. And after Lu Yi casually handed over an excellent antidote pill to him, he was even more certain of this conjecture. Unfortunately, Lu Yi did not admit to this matter. The arcane realm is so beautiful. Why don't you go to those arcane realms? Yingwu Ji could not help but ask, and he carefully glanced at Lu Yi. Fortunately, Lu Yi did not look at him like he was an idiot this time. Who doesn't want to go? Yuan Xiang smiled bitterly. Now, all the humans living in the Wushuang continent dream of entering the arcane realm, but who can go? Not to mention that there is no guide. Even if we go, we won't be able to find the entrance to the arcane realm. Even if we do find it, we might not be able to enter. We might even be killed. Yingwu Ji frowned. Why is that? In the beginning, the human clan of the Wushuang continent controlled many arcane realms. All the arcane realms opened their doors wide. Anyone who went to the arcane realm would be accepted. But the arcane realm was only a small world, and its capacity was limited. If there were too many people living in the arcane realm, the resources would definitely not be able to keep up. So gradually, the arcane realm no longer accepted outsiders. In particular, I heard that there was an arcane realm where people from different sects fought for control of the arcane realm. In the end, both sides suffered great losses, and the corpse clan took advantage of this and slaughtered everyone. So now, it is extremely difficult to enter the arcane realm. Is there no other way to enter the arcane realm? Lu Yi asked. From the moment he was transported from the 9 provinces to the Wushuang continent, a message exploded in Lu Ye's heart. It was the mission given to him by Tianji. Save the broken Wushuang continent. If he wanted to do this, he would have to borrow the power of the arcane realm. So if he could enter the arcane realm, it would be easier to do things in the future. So, Yuanxiang looked like a girl without any scheming thoughts. Even when facing people like Lu Yi and Ying Wuji, she would answer all of them. Lu Yi naturally wanted to find out more information from her. Of course there is. Yuanxiang nodded. This is also the only hope for the survival of the human race. It is said that the 3 great arcane realms will send out emissaries to search for suitable people to join the arcane realm every once in a while. 3 years ago, a few people from our stronghold were selected and taken away, but this kind of thing can't be actively sought. We can only wait passively, and even if we wait for them to come, they might not be selected. Hearing this, Ying Wuji nodded. It seems that the people of the 3 great arcane realms didn't go too far. They still left a glimmer of hope for others. They might not be willing to do this, Lu Yi said thoughtfully. Yuanxiang looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Senior Drunken Mountain said so before. Drunken Mountain? He was the controller of Yuanxiang's stronghold, and he should be the strongest. It seemed that Yuanxiang had a lot of respect for him. What did Senior Drunken Mountain say? Lu Yi asked. Although he had some guesses in his heart, they were still guesses in the end. Senior Drunken Mountain said that if the 3 great arcane realms didn't do this, there would definitely be many humans looking for their door every year. At that time, it might attract the attention of the corpse race, and then bring some trouble to the 3 great arcane realms. Therefore, the 3 great arcane realms used this method to give all the remaining humans a glimmer of hope. Lu Yi nodded slightly. It seemed that the person called Drunken Mountain had the same thoughts as him. But then again, this couldn't be said to be the fault of the 3 great arcane realms. Just as Yuanxiang had said, the secret realm was only a small world after all. Even if it was independent of the unparalleled continent, its capacity was limited. There was no way to accept all the humans. Sending out emissaries to find some suitable candidates to bring back to the secret realm. Firstly, it would give the remaining humans hope that they wouldn't do something that would harm both sides. Secondly, it would also strengthen the secret realm. The power of the secret realm could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Is there anything worth paying attention to in the corpse race? Lu Yi roughly understood the situation on the human side, so the next thing he needed to understand was naturally the corpse race. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Corpse race. Right now, the corpse race is everywhere in the unparalleled continent. If there's anything worth paying attention to, then it would be the secret realm of the Palace of Turbid Heaven, which is also the place with the most corpse race. I heard that the first corpse race, the Golden Corpse King, was originally a disciple of the Palace of Turbid Heaven, and is now entrenched there. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. You mean there's a secret realm in the Palace of Turbid Heaven? Chapter 791. That's right. Yuan Xiang nodded. I heard that Pure Heaven Temple used to be the most powerful sect in the world, and that Sealed World was also the largest of all the sealed worlds. Unfortunately, it has now been reduced to a place for the corpse race to raise corpses. It is said that the Golden Corpse King even changed the name of Pure Heaven Temple to Corpse King Palace. Hearing this, Lu Yi had a thoughtful look on his face as he faintly had some ideas in his heart. Along the way, Yuan Xiangzhu, who was ignorant of worldly affairs, spilled the beans and told them all the information that he knew. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji would ask questions from time to time, but most of the time, they would listen quietly. On the second day of entering the Peerless Continent, Lu Yi finally understood a little about the situation here. We're almost at our stronghold. Yuan Xiang, who was leading the way, suddenly turned into a streak of light and descended. Lu Yi and Ying Wuji followed closely behind. After landing on the ground, Yuan Xiang continued to walk forward. Lu Yi looked around. This place was deep in the mountains, hidden and remote. Almost all of the human race's strongholds were located in places that were not easily discovered. This way, they could avoid the detection of the omnipresent corpse race. Once the location of a stronghold was exposed, they could either kill the corpse race that discovered the stronghold or move immediately. Otherwise, disaster would befall them. The location of Yuan Xiang's stronghold was obviously not bad. The group had already settled down here for more than 10 years without being discovered by the corpse race. According to the information that Yuan Xiang had divulged, there were two types of corpses. Under normal circumstances, the rotting corpses would not move. They would choose a place that suited them and enter a state of suspended animation to nourish the corpses under their command. Wuxia had encountered such a situation before. On the corpse race's side, this method was called corpse raising. The corpse race's corpse race had a complex origin and varied strength. Only in this way could the corpse race slowly grow stronger. The ones that moved around and hunted the human race were zombies. Relatively speaking, their individual strength was much stronger than rotten corpses and their bodies were tough. Ordinary methods could not cause them effective damage. On the current peerless continent, there were tens of thousands of human race strongholds. As long as they could avoid the detection of zombies, they could basically sit back and relax. Of course, if they were unlucky enough to be attacked by rotten corpses, they could only wait for death. During the past 1,000 years, the remaining human beings had been trying to survive in the cracks and had come up with many effective ways to deal with the undead. Lu Yi, who was walking behind Yuan Xiang, suddenly paused. In the next instant, Wuxia also stopped and looked around. Yuan Xiang turned around and looked at the two of them. The stronghold is just ahead. Her expression was very unnatural, and her face was a little red. Her gaze was evasive, as if she had done something wrong. Even her voice was as weak as a mosquito. Lu Yi and Wuxia turned a deaf ear. Wuxia suddenly laughed. "I thought you were innocent and kind, but it turns out that you are hiding evil intentions. I really didn't expect that in this world, the hearts of people are so old." He couldn't help shaking his head as he glanced at Lu Yi mockingly. "It's a waste to call you an Array Dao Grandmaster, invincible among your peers. Can't you see anything?" Lu Yi didn't say anything. His left and right thumbs gently stroked the scabbard of the mountain pan saber as he calmly looked at Yuan Xiang, who wasn't far away. Yuan Xiang's expression became even more unnatural. "Yuan Xiang, retreat." Suddenly, a fierce shout came from nearby. An invisible force seemed to grab Yuan Xiang from behind, and as she cried out in alarm, she was sent flying. In the next instant, ripples appeared in the air, and the scenery around them changed. A thick fog surged out of nowhere, covering a large area. In an instant, the place where Lu Yi and Wuxia were standing became pitch black. The formation, and it was a combination of an illusory formation and a bewildering formation. Yuan Xiang didn't put up any defenses against Lu Yi and Wuxia at all. She looked innocent and naive, and answered almost all of their questions. So even Lu Yi didn't expect that she would put herself and Wuxia in the same formation. This kind of formation was definitely not hastily made. It was prepared long ago, and might not have been targeted at Lu Yi and Wuxia. It was a method of self-defense for the cultivators of the stronghold. Even though they didn't notice it beforehand, Lu Yi was a member of the Fang clan. So, when they stepped into the dragon grass formation, it was even more obvious. Wuxia was a bit slower to notice it. He only noticed it after Lu Yi suddenly stopped. For ghost cultivators, the Tao of formations was a necessary path to cultivate. Because when ghost cultivators became strong, they might need to sneak into formations to kill their targets. A qualified ghost cultivator must have good attainments in the Tao of formations. Wuxia's attainments in the Tao of formations were naturally not as good as Lu Ye's, but they weren't too bad either. The girl was currently trapped in a bewildering formation, an illusory formation, and Wuxia, omnipotent Mao Zhou had also hidden a few killing formations. If they acted rashly, they would definitely trigger the power of those killing formations. "Lu Yi, our situation isn't too good." Wuxia had already taken out his two curved blades, and his heart was filled with shame. He had been in the cultivation world for many years. He never thought that one day he would be tricked by a little girl, and he didn't even notice it beforehand. "Do you want to do it or should I?" he asked. If they wanted to leave this place, they definitely had to break through the formation. A formation cultivator from a broken world naturally wouldn't have high attainments. Wuxia was confident that he could break through the formation, but if he moved, the other party would definitely trigger the power of the killing formation. When that time came, they would need Lu Yi to support and protect them. If he let Lu Yi break through the formation, then he would be the one supporting and protecting them. At this moment, Lu Yi had already activated the clear vision spiritual inscriptions to strengthen her eyes. Her gaze was deep and serene, as if it could pierce through the void and break through the layers of obstructions of the formation, allowing her to see the scene outside. Outside the formation, there were 4 more figures besides Yuan Xiang. The one in the lead was a cultivator wielding a sword. It was unknown whether or not he was a sword cultivator. "Where are Yu Zhen and the others? Who did you bring back?" The cultivator, who seemed to be a sword cultivator, asked. Yuan Xiang's eyes instantly reddened. "They're all dead." "What?" Everyone's expressions changed greatly. "Your team had 6 people, and Yu Zhen and the others were all quite strong. How did they all die?" Yuan Xiang said, "We encountered a very powerful zombie. Uncle Yu and the others weren't a match for it. 3 of them died on the spot. Uncle Yu was also poisoned by the Origin Corpse poison and died of his injuries. Aunt Shen didn't want to live alone, so she followed Uncle Yu." Recalling the painful memories, Yuan Xiang couldn't help but cry again. However, she suppressed her emotions and recounted what had happened. Everyone's expressions dimmed. In the apocalyptic world, life and death were normal. However, even though they were mentally prepared, when it really happened, they couldn't help but feel sad. "Then how did you survive?" "It was that person with the sword who saved me." Yuan Xiang pointed in the direction of the Great Formation. "When he saved us, Uncle Yu and Auntie Shen were still alive." Hearing this, everyone's expression softened. The sword-wielding cultivator glanced thoughtfully at the formation and said, "Do you know who they are?" Yuan Xiang sobbed a few times, suppressing the sorrow in her heart. "The one with the sword is called Luya. The other one looks sneaky, and he's called Wuxia. They're martial brothers. They claim to have come from a small stronghold. They've never left that stronghold before, so they know nothing about the outside world." "Know nothing?" The sword-wielding cultivator frowned. In this chaotic world, was there anyone who didn't know anything about the outside world? Seeing his confusion, Yuan Xiang said, "They should have a very powerful master who has always protected them well. They only came out of that stronghold a month ago when their master passed away." After a pause, she added, "Big Brother Wu, they saved my life, and they don't seem to be bad people. Don't make things too difficult for them, okay?" Just as Lu Yi had thought, the formation outside the stronghold was not specifically targeted at them. Instead, it was a precautionary measure for the stronghold, and cultivators were stationed outside the formation all year round. They were guarding against the invasion of the corpse race or other humans with ulterior motives. No matter how pure and kind Yuan Xiang's heart was, she knew that she could not casually lead strangers into the stronghold. However, she had seen Lu Ye's strength with her own eyes and knew that she was no match for him. Thus, she was extremely docile and cooperative along the way. After leading Lu Yi and Wuxia into the formation, the others in the stronghold would thoroughly investigate their origins and determine their motives. If Lu Yi and Wuxia truly had no ill intentions, then there was nothing to say. However, if they came with ill intentions, then the stronghold would have the upper hand. In the current peerless continent, it was not easy for humans to survive. Their enemies were not only the corpse race, but also many humans who had abandoned their own conscience and committed crimes. Comparatively speaking, the evil of the corpse race could be seen at a glance. However, the evil of humans was sometimes hidden very deeply. For thousands of years, it was common for strongholds to be massacred because of the evil deeds of their own kind. In the current chaotic world, no matter what it was resources, food, clothing, even the cultivators themselves, the most common thing in the flourishing age might be enough to make 2 humans fight to the death. Wu Jun said, "Since they saved your life, we naturally will not make things too difficult for them. However, we still have to wait for Senior Drunken Mountain to ask and let him make the decision." He comforted Yuan Xiang, but a fierce look flashed through his eyes. These two uninvited guests might be able to deceive Yuan Xiang, but if they wanted to deceive him, that would be impossible. No matter how small the stronghold was, no matter how well protected it would not be completely ignorant of the current peerless continent. These two, there was definitely something wrong with them. Thus, no matter what, he had to take them down first. As for their origins and motives, it would not be too late to slowly investigate. Chapter 792. These two people were able to save Yuan Xiang from the zombies that had almost slaughtered the Zhen squad. Their strength must be extraordinary. But since they had entered the formation, pure strength was meaningless. So it shouldn't be difficult to take them down. Wu Jun thought so in his heart. Suddenly he heard a low cry. He hurriedly turned his head to look at a skinny old man. Elder Su, what's wrong? The reason why their stronghold could survive here for more than 10 years was because of Drunk Mountain's wise leadership, but the old man called Su Wang beside him also contributed greatly. Because he was a formation cultivator. Many of the formations inside and outside the stronghold were set up by him. In this apocalyptic world, what was the most precious? Naturally, it was all kinds of outer path talents. Formation cultivators, pill cultivators, weapon refiners, sects that were very common in the Golden Age were now sparse. There weren't many who could achieve something in these outer paths. However, these external Daos were indispensable to cultivators. Spirit pills were needed when cultivating, formations were needed to protect the stronghold, and spirit weapons were needed for cultivators to kill enemies. None of these could be missing. The stronghold controlled by Drunk Mountain didn't look big, but it had various kinds of reputation. Within tens of thousands of miles, it was quite famous. Several nearby strongholds would often bring some materials to trade with them, exchanging them for some spirit pills, spirit weapons and so on. As a result, the living environment of this stronghold was slightly better than other strongholds. Su Wang's seniority was quite high, and his reputation in the stronghold wasn't low. He had long passed the age of being surprised, but at this moment he exclaimed as if he had seen something incredible. Su Wang pointed at the area covered by the formation in front of him and couldn't finish his sentence for a while. But in the next moment, Wu Jun knew what Su Wang was shocked about. This was because two figures, one in front and one behind, walked out leisurely as if they were taking a stroll in a courtyard. The formation that had guarded the stronghold for more than 10 years didn't play any role in stopping or trapping the enemy. Those two people should be the uninvited guests who were trapped in the array. Wu Jun's eyes narrowed. The others' expressions also changed, and they all urged their spirit power to be on guard. Behind Lu Yi, Ing Wuji didn't say a word. At this moment, he finally understood the difference between himself and Lu Yi on the path of formations. The gap between them. The formation that trapped them was not very advanced, and Ing Wuji was able to do it. It wouldn't be difficult to see through some flaws and crack them. It would take some effort, but he followed Lu Yi, one step to the east, one step to the west. After a dozen or so steps, he actually walked out of the formation safely. During this period, he did not activate any killing arrays. Such a method clearly demonstrated his attainments in the array Dao. Lu Yi was miles ahead of him. This sudden turn of events left Wu Jun and the others at a loss. So far, they had never thought that there would be such a thing as for someone to be able to walk out of the activated array in such a manner. It was highly doubtful. Was the array broken? Looking at the rolling fog in the formation, it was obvious that it was still in operation. In the middle. This was not good. He didn't know whether this person was a friend or a foe. He had a preconceived notion. Wu Jun had always felt that these two people had ulterior motives. Could it be that they wanted to use force? However, once a battle broke out, if there was a corpse clan nearby, they would definitely, of course, they would be attracted here. Looking at the two people in front of him, the one with the saber was older than Yuan Xiang. He was no more than 1 or 2 years old, but his expression was indifferent. His figure was like a pure lake. Although his aura was restrained, Wu Jun could still feel a faint sense of oppression from his body, as if that calm body contained an extremely terrifying power. The other one looked sneaky and didn't seem to be someone to be trifled with. He could only send a warning message and get the people in the stronghold to come out and help. Just as Wu Jun made up his mind, Ku Su Wang took 2 steps forward and cupped his hands politely. This old man is Su Wang. Greetings. Greetings, young friends. Elder Su. Wu Jun and the other 2 were stunned. Because of Su Wang's identity as an array cultivator, in the stronghold, he was only below Zuishan. Although he was easygoing and wasn't harsh on people, Wu Jun had never seen him so polite. He was naturally stunned. Su Wang knew what he was thinking and waved his hand. He stared at Lu Yi and said, "This young friend was able to see through the formation's flaws without making a sound and walk out safely without breaking the formation. This old man admits defeat in his mastery of the formation Dao. To be able to break the formation he was so proud of so easily, this person's mastery of the formation Dao was definitely much higher than his. Such a person would definitely be treated as an honored guest even if he went to those secret realms. Why would he set his eyes on a small stronghold like ours?" Su Wang's words were obviously for the others to hear. Wu Jun and the others were stunned. They never thought that Su Wang would give the newcomers such a high evaluation. It was somewhat unbelievable. But on second thought, they knew that Su Wang was right. The secret realms had strict requirements for accepting people, but if he was really an extremely accomplished array cultivator, the secret realms would probably not reject him. They wouldn't have any crooked ideas about their small stronghold. Could it be, he was wrong before, and these 2 people really didn't know anything about the outside world? "Old sir, you're too kind," Lu Yi replied indifferently. "It seems that our misunderstanding has been resolved." He didn't care too much about Yuan Xiang's previous actions. From Yuan Xiang's standpoint, what she did was right. She couldn't just casually bring an outsider back to the stronghold. Moreover, these people didn't immediately kill him after the formation was activated. It was obvious that they planned to only capture him and not kill him. This little disturbance couldn't even be considered a grudge. "We were too sensitive, but this is a chaotic world. Please forgive us." Su Wang apologized and gestured with his hand. "You 2 are guests from afar. Why don't you come in for a chat?" He was already old and didn't have much longer to live. Although he had been searching for his successor in the stronghold all these years, he didn't find anyone with talent in the formation Dao. No matter how he taught them, a few brats couldn't even reach the level of elegance. If he could rope this Lu Yi into the stronghold, even if he died in the future, the stronghold's safety would be guaranteed. However, he only had this thought. He still needed to wait for Drunken Mountain to make a decision. Moreover, he had to first investigate these 2 people's temperaments. As for their origins, it wasn't that important. In this chaotic world, it was already difficult to survive. Who would investigate someone's background? As long as their temperament wasn't bad, they could be roped in. "All right," Lu Yi replied and walked forward. Ying Wu hurriedly followed behind. If he was alone, he definitely wouldn't be so relaxed. Going deep into someone else's stronghold was still somewhat dangerous. However, with Lu Yi, he didn't need to think too much. He had to admit that Lu Yi always gave people a great sense of security. It made him subconsciously feel that even if there was a dragon's lair or a tiger's den ahead, Lu Yi could still kill them all. He was suddenly shocked. How did his mentality become like this? No, Lu Yi was from Grand Heaven Alliance. He was an enemy, not a friend that he could rely on. Ying Wuji secretly warned himself. His mood suddenly became inexplicably heavy. Su Wang personally led Lu Yi and Ying Wuji to the stronghold. Yuan Xiang accompanied them. She looked guilty and wanted to say something. However, she didn't say it in the end. Along the way, Su Wang casually asked about Lu Yi and Ying Wuji's origins. Lu Yi repeated what he said to Yuan Xiang. Su Wang didn't say anything. Naturally, he wouldn't believe it so easily. The location of the stronghold was less than 10 kilometers away from the formation. In front of an extremely hidden cave entrance, there were cultivators. It was guarded, and there was even a formation concealing it. Seeing Su Wang lead people over, one of them flashed out from the shadows and looked at Lu Yi and Ying Wuji in surprise. Elder Su, they are guests, there's no need to ask. Su Wang waved his hand. Yes. That person replied and hid in the shadows again. It could be seen that Su Wang had high prestige in the stronghold. Following Su Wang's actions, the concealed entrance to the stronghold was revealed. It was a dark cave, with dim firelight shining out from within. This way, please, Su Wang said and led the way. As soon as they entered the cave, they saw the light of torches. Every section of the path was illuminated by torches. They spiraled all the way down. Lu Yi estimated that they were at least 3,000 feet underground. Suddenly, a huge karst cave appeared in front of them. The karst cave was spacious, and there were many figures moving around inside. On both sides of the karst cave were carved stone rooms. Seeing Su Wang return, many people greeted him. At the same time, they looked curiously at Lu Yi and Ingwuji. To them, outsiders had appeared in the stronghold a long time ago. A stronghold like theirs usually wouldn't let outsiders in easily. Lu Yi walked over and took a look. He roughly understood the overall strength of this stronghold. There weren't many people, and their overall strength wasn't strong. More than half of them were mortals who had never cultivated. In the current unparalleled continent, it was already difficult for cultivators to survive, let alone mortals. However, mortals were the foundation of cultivators. Without mortals to give birth to children, where would there be cultivators? The children born between cultivators might not necessarily be suitable for cultivation. Although the remaining half were cultivators, their cultivation was uneven. Most of them were only equivalent to the spirit stream realm. A stronghold like this couldn't even compare to the weakest rank 9 sect in the 9 states. The lack of living materials made the mortals here look sallow and emaciated. Even the cultivators here were inferior to the people of the 9 states. This was something that Lu Yi had noticed the moment he met Yuan Xiang and the others. Therefore, at the same level of cultivation, the cultivators of the 9 states could completely defeat the cultivators here. He just didn't know what the cultivators who came from the secret realm that didn't lack resources were like. Su Wang led Lu Yi and Ingwuji to an empty stone room. He said, "The two of you can rest here for a while. This old man will go find Drunk Mountain." He then instructed Yuan Xiang, "Greet the two guests before turning to leave." "Brother Shen." Shen Zhangqing walked on the road. When he met people he knew, he would greet them or nod to them. But no matter who it was, no one had any extra expression on their faces. It was as if they were indifferent to everything. To this, Shen Zhangqing was already used to it. Because this was the Demon Suppression Department, an organization that maintained the stability of the Great Qin Empire. Their main duty was to kill demons and monsters. Of course, they also had other side jobs. Could be said that, in the Demon Suppression Department, everyone's hands were stained with a lot of blood. When a person was used to life and death, they would become indifferent to many things. When he first came to this world, Shen Zhangqing wasn't used to it. But as time passed, he got used to it. The Demon Suppression Department was very big. Those who could stay in the Demon Suppression Department were all powerful experts or people who had the potential to become experts. Shen Zhangqing belonged to the latter. The Demon Suppression Department was divided into 2 occupations. One was the Guardian and the other was the Demon Exorcist. Anyone who entered the Demon Suppression Department would start from the lowest level, the Demon Exorcist. Then, they would advance step by step until they finally had the chance to become a Guardian. Shen Zhangqing's previous life was a Demon Exorcist trainee in the Demon Suppression Department. He was also the lowest level Demon Exorcist trainee. He had the memories of his previous life. He was also very familiar with the environment of the Demon Suppression Department. It didn't take long for Shen Zhangqing to stop in front of a loft. Different from the other places in the Demon Suppression Department that were filled with killing intent, this loft was like a crane in a flock of chickens. In the Demon Suppression Department that was filled with blood, it presented a different kind of tranquility. At this time, the loft's door was open. Occasionally, people would come in and out. Shen Zhangqing only hesitated for a moment before stepping in. Entering the loft, the environment suddenly changed. A wave of ink mixed with a faint smell of blood hit him in the face. His brows instinctively furrowed, but they quickly smoothed out. The smell of blood on everyone in the demon suppression department was almost impossible to wash clean. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.